Guess we'll go ahead and get started. This is the TAC meeting for SIMPO, Thursday, May 6th. Allison, can you call roll for me?
Or Chairman Marbury.
Here.
Vice Chair Davis. Looks like you might be on mute. See his name, but I don't hear him.
Delivering on Sunday.
Member Hughes. Absent. Member Mattingly.
Here.
Member Cherry.
Here.
Member Latier. Absent. Member Bondoc.
Here.
The Prescott National Forest seat is vacant, but we do have a quorum.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I went ahead and unmuted. Can you hear me now?
We got you just fine, Norm.
Yeah, there's something wrong on my computer too, so I was unmuted on my phone, but I'll make sure you can hear me.
Okay. We got you loud and clear however you're doing it now. So, all right. So item 2, Title 6 Policy and Meeting Procedures. SIMPO complies with the Title 6 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and related non-discrimination statutes and regulations in all programs and activities. Members of the public may review the SIMPO Title 6 plan and submit a self-identification survey by accessing the SIMPO website. A reminder to these attending this meeting, please keep your line on mute until you wish to speak. This meeting is available for public viewing on the SIMPO YouTube page. Okay. Item 3, call to the public. This item is to provide an opportunity for presentation and comments by the public on subjects not on the agenda. Individuals wishing to address the board need not request permission in advance and are limited to 3 minutes. So for those who wish to participate, there's some links here, but if you're, I think it's listed as an attendee, and there should be a button that says raise your hand. So if there's anyone that wants to speak on items not on the agenda, if we could just have you raise your hand and Allison will unmute you, and you've got 3 minutes to speak. So Allison, do you see anyone wishing to speak?
Not seeing anybody as of now.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can, excuse me. One of the phone numbers calling in, Allison and Daniel, is John Hughes. If we can unmute him, he accidentally got on the attendee side of the meeting, so he is present. And if you can unmute him, and John, once they do that, if you'd announce yourself, then we'll know you're in.
Any of you know which phone number?
Thank you guys so much.
You're welcome, John. Thanks for being here.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, Mr.
Sorry,
Chair,
guys.
no worries. Mr. Chair, no other public comments that we're aware of at this time.
Okay. So with that, we'll move on to item 4, Administrator Update. So Mr. Gallegos.
Mr. Chair, members of the TAC, we definitely have a full agenda packet today, so I will be very brief. I just wanted to actually announce an item that's coming up here on number 6. Today we have Kevin Adam. He'll be speaking in a few minutes. He's the Executive Director of the Rural Transportation Advocacy Council. Some of you might be familiar. Typically, he comes to our executive board meetings and gives updates. I extended an invitation to be with you all today, and I will do that on a more regular basis with this technical committee. The reason for it, a couple of reasons. I think it's very valuable if you follow his updates in the executive board, but to really see Kevin's role and the organization's role on our behalf, to really be an advocacy arm of SIMPO and the MPO and COGS in Greater Arizona. In particular, if you remember, probably one of my first meetings back with you all, talked about an initiative or a program that we were going to be working with through our TAC, and that's for some one-time funding. And we're still on track to do that. When Kevin comes up, him and or I can talk a little bit more about it, but we're still moving forward. We're still looking for a possible one-time funding legislation. And we're confident because we're going to stand as Greater Arizona, which again is outside Phoenix and Tucson, all the MPOs and COGs, and we're going to have a list of projects. As of now, tentatively, we have penciled in some projects for a $4 million one-time funding to the SIMPO region next year. So the reason, Kevin's here is to kind of give us an update on what's happening on a national level, on a state level, but where that's all going to lead to hopefully benefit us with Kevin's work and our tax work. So I just wanted to give that lead in so that when we get there, you know a little bit more why he's visiting. But that's really my only update, Mr. Chair. And I'll definitely have comments and other things on other items. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Vinny. And that's one thing, I am trying to move this along because we do have a pretty big agenda. So let me know if I'm going too fast. So I can get the light to quit auto working on it. All right, consideration and possible action to approve the April 8th, 2021 special meeting minutes of the Technical Advisory Committee. Has everyone read the minutes, and does anyone have any comments or corrections before we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I've read the special meeting minutes from April 8th, and I certainly am happy to make a motion to approve the April 8th, 2021 special meeting minutes of the SIMPO Technical Advisory Committee.
Okay, have a motion and have a second? Okay, I can second that motion. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Item 6, Rural Transportation Advocacy Council update. Kevin, you're on.
Well, thank you, Frank. Good morning, everyone. And I'll follow on what Vinny just indicated. And, we are pursuing legislation next year. So I'll give you a little bit of a backdrop, which I think will also serve as a good update on where we are with legislation right now. And while we don't have the specifics, we are highly anticipating that there's a lot of potential for a lot of revenue to be directed to infrastructure in the upcoming year. We know at the state level, despite all of the very dire forecasts that came out at the beginning of the pandemic, the revenue collections over the last year have actually grown at a very healthy pace. And then on top of that, with the relief funding that has come in from Washington, we actually, this last round, the state government received more relief funding than our entire state budget for the current year. We have an 11.8 billion state budget, and 12.2 billion came in relief funding. This is relief funding directed at a budget that was looking at least a 2 billion surplus just based on state generated revenues. So there's a tremendous amount of revenue at the state capitol right now. It is, there are some complications as far as how the budget is going to work out this year. Much of that funding is one-time in nature, and so lawmakers are still trying to figure out how to work that into their priorities. But of course, when you're talking about one-time funding, capital improvement projects are a perfect use for that. It's not an ongoing expense. It's not like hiring thousands of full-time employees that you're going to want to keep employed after that first year, and when that one-time revenue, basically is used up. And so capital improvement projects, great priority. We're already aware that that is the intent of lawmakers, is to use a lot of this one-time funding for infrastructure projects this year. Legislative leadership very early on in session indicated they'd be setting aside $200 million for projects. Since then, the forecasts have just gotten better, and that was before the relief funding came in from DC. So I think there's a good opportunity that that number will even increase more. And then, of course, behind all of that, right now, the top agenda item in Washington is an infrastructure bill. And so, and we're talking multi-trillion. Now, of course, not all of that would be directed to transportation, but what we're seeing from the administration and the Republican response to that is the one part of the president's plan that Republicans seem to agree on, is to move what you would consider to be the more traditional types of infrastructure with a very substantial increase in federal funding, not only with authorization and the ongoing revenue levels, but also some one-time funding directed at certain priorities, such as getting everything in a state of good repair. So bottom line is, we're looking at I think, potential for a tremendous amount of revenue to get directed our way. Now, what we are doing with the earmarks, and I have to qualify this, I think that our overwhelming preference would be for any surplus funding to get directed into the HERF, so that it goes through the existing distribution processes, and it allows ADOT in the regions to program and prioritize and make the best investment choices possible. Unfortunately, that is not how the legislature is preferring to utilize this funding. Instead, they're looking at earmarks, and that way they know specifically what the funding is being used for. They can also go back to their districts and take credit for the projects that they were successful in getting funding for. And so while we'll continue to advocate for more funding to go through the existing distributions and allow for programming, we don't want to be left out on this earmarking. And we're trying to find I think what I would consider to be a good compromise. We're going to give the legislature a list of specific projects, but it will be projects that will consist of the priorities of all the greater Arizona COGs and MPOs, based on a process that you have as far as identifying them. So statewide, we're looking at a 40 million total, and I believe that comes out to 3.74 million, somewhere in that range for the SIMPO range. And so that is the process that I know Vinny will be leading you on. And it is our hope that, again, there's going to be, I think this is not just a one-time event this year. I think that we'll probably see pretty substantial state surpluses for a couple of years. And so we are very hopeful that that revenue will be available, and we'll be proactive and try to pursue it in this form. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. I'm just sure as this moves forward, you'll be working closely with Vinny, so he'll probably be the key for the SIMPO region and that money like you described, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. So
I got a quick question, Kevin, and you may not have an answer to this, The recent American Rescue funding that came through, a lot of our members got a chunk of that to varying degrees, and that has, pretty limited relationships to infrastructure at this time. But we're curious if there's any word on the street that the infrastructure plan that's being proposed at the federal level would have a similar type of distribution where, the cities or counties would get a chunk of money that they can then program as they see fit rather than having to go through the state. Any thoughts on that, or have you heard any, rumors on it?
I think that we'll probably see across the board increases in funding, and there's a huge push to provide funding directly to the locals and regions. The one part of that I think is somewhat unfortunate is I think the model or structure that they're currently using is the STBG one, which unfortunately, and this really, for the most part, is out of ADOT's control. It's really how STBG is structured nationwide. It really favors direct funding to the major metropolitan areas. And if you look at the distributions in the state, that carries out that way. Greater Arizona, we're not receiving our per capita share compared to the other major metros, and unfortunately, it's because of that that federal formula and structure for SDBG. So we're working to try to make it more equitable for the smaller regions and rural areas. But that is one of the challenges with the direct funding to the locals.
All right, I appreciate that, and anything you can do to advocate for that is greatly appreciated. So thank you.
You bet.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment. This is Norm.
Sure, please go ahead, Norm.
As a technical advisory committee, I know when money's coming down the pipeline and being proposed, I think it's incumbent upon the TAC to have some projects ready and that we've agreed to, so that maybe we're making a technical recommendation, and I think that's important. So I might, and it's my opinion that, we probably ought to have a project that if 3.7 million's come to Simpo, and I think Dan, Jerry, you made the recommendation that we go ahead and go with the SR 69169 roundabout. I might suggest for the next executive board meeting, if we do a similar item, we have a recommendation to the boards with our recommendations why we think it's good as a TAC. But I'm not particularly advocating for that project. I just want to make sure the TAC's okay with what our recommendation is going to be.
And I'll agree with that, Norm. And I think Vinny has, he kind of developed this, I think we call it the parking lot of projects. That we had that on there, maybe some other possibilities in addition, and maybe we need to be thinking a little bit about expanding that here in the next couple of months. Should there be some other funding that somehow does get funneled through to Simpo from the feds outside of this proposed, one-time funding through the state, you can only do so much with planning if we get a big chunk of money coming in, and I'm talking, say we get 10 million plus come in through Simpo somehow, that needs to get divided into our member agencies. I think having some ideas for that, assuming it will be federal dollars, it needs to make it through a federal process. It needs to be able to be cleared right away wise and utility wise and whatnot. So, I think it's important all of our member agencies be considering that here in the next 6 months, if at all possible.
Yeah, Dan, I like your recommendation for that particular project. It seems to be a priority for the area. But as I said, as I mentioned, I'd like to see at the next executive board meeting that if it looks like this is the amount of money, I think it's incumbent upon the TAC to go ahead and say that's what we're really looking hard at. I know I met with District Engineer Stump, and he mentioned that they're starting to design right after July 1st. So I'd like to think as a TAC we could advocate for that project so that we're ready because you'll still take design time. And once again, I think I always like to look for delivery of projects. As you mentioned, Dan, you can only plan so much. Let's go deliver a project.
And Mr. Chairman and Member Cherry and Davis, so absolutely. So we do have that project penciled in. Again, I think it was either my first or second meeting back, we talked about it. And to Norm's point, we will definitely follow up with the executive board. My hope was to actually do it at the retreat in July. We'll go ahead and give you the opportunity in June to go ahead and reaffirm the priorities. But as of now, you all have prioritized 69 and 169 as Plan A, and then Plan B is what comes out of the 89A on-ramp study, some implementation of that. And to the group discussion and a little bit of Kevin, the news keeps getting better and better. So to Dan's point, I am going to go ahead and expand that list, or ask you to expand that list in case we increase the funding or we have some more opportunities. So we'll definitely solidify it. And I think the best place to do that is definitely with the executive board at the retreat. So I appreciate all the feedback.
Thank you. And if I could just finish with, this exercise that I'm going through with this 3.7 million to SIMPO, this is specific to pursuing earmark legislation at the state level next year. But there's I think that there's going to be a lot of revenue opportunities. Again, we don't know the mechanics and how specifically they're going to basically come to the state, but I'm anticipating a lot of earmark opportunities at the state and federal level, probably more formula funding, and a lot more competitive grants, not only using the existing grant and formulas, but the potential for some new ones. And so I would be proactive and ready to pursue that funding when it becomes available. So I do think it's the timing is such that I'd be planning and dreaming big right now, because usually I give very negative reports, and so for me to be this positive is out of the ordinary. But things are really shaping up to where the infrastructure is just getting a lot of attention right now, and I'd be ready to get on top of that and take advantage.
We appreciate that, Kevin. Thank you.
Okay. All right, and I'll just maybe add one point if I could. Kevin, I don't know what sort of influence you have, but one thing we've talked about several times is we've got some corridor studies and some projects that are future corridors that we're starting to see, development that might be encroaching on those corridors, but we're restricted by federal funding guidelines with applying federal money for say, right-of-way acquisition or whatnot, because we would have to go in construction in 10 years. And some of these projects are in the tens of millions of dollars, and besides that, even ADOT's plan right now doesn't allow for expansion. So just kind of a bug in your ear, maybe work on that end to allow some of the, we have all these nice plans, but sometimes we're restricted in how we can implement them by how the funding comes in. So if that makes sense.
Oh, I hear you. And yeah, just to follow up on that, I mean, we're continually pushing to try to streamline and simplify the federal process. And I do have some skepticism there as far as how successful or to what degree will be with that one. But I think that also circles back to the earmarking we're trying to do at the state level. It makes that state generated funding that has so much more flexibility that much more important. And so I think that's something else to consider when you're deciding what projects to pick for our list, but also just in general, is there going to be more state generated revenue available, and sort of the plans that you make for it.
And I'll add in a little bit that, if we get a slug of federal money, let's say, the county has certainly taken advantage of the HERF exchange program in the past. That has been massively beneficial to us on a couple projects already in recent years. One in the Verde Valley and one here in the Simpo area. And so, I encourage member agencies to consider that. I mean, it costs you a little bit of money off the top, but it makes it far more flexible, and you can avoid, having to go through some of the rigmarole, if you will, that the federal funding requires. So keep that in mind too, should there be an opportunity that presents itself. I like to, from a county standpoint, I like to keep some projects in our back pocket that I think can successfully make it through a federal process. It's nice to have that opportunity, but I fully recognize that's not always possible, or it messes up your priorities if you have to force something in that direction. So.
All right. Anybody else have anything for Kevin?
Thanks, Kevin.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. All right. That takes us to item 7, update of crash data analysis and highway safety improvement program applications project. It's Vinny and Mike. I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the TAC. So it's my privilege and honor to introduce our consultant that we were able to bring on board as Greenlight Traffic Engineering. We have Mike Blankenship, who will be the project manager for us, working with you all today and staff today to move forward. We've already had a few meetings with Mike, and we've tried to, there's quite a bit of data that's in your packet that Mike has already generated, and he'll go through that, but tried to streamline it for our discussion today for the Highway Safety Improvement Program. I've had the privilege of working with Mike and his team the last several years in Lake Havasu. Mike's done at Havasu was doing our HSIP efforts, and then also he was working with our regional transportation plan as a sub to Kittleson and Associates, and then also several safety plans. So Mike's definitely very familiar with Arizona, extremely familiar with the HSIP program. If you remember in his quote or his document to us, again, has worked with several MPOs, COGs, and jurisdictions throughout the state. Highly successful in reviewing the crash data, and then most importantly, the application itself. So to kind of lead up into this discussion, again, remember what we're working towards with Mike is to begin to review the crash data, to identify projects. As I understand it as a TAC, you all have expressed a couple points. Number one, we're looking to get 3 regional applications out of this discussion, but there's also a discussion that I would need each member agency to keep in mind, and to repeat some of what you all have already said, that depending how the discussion goes, there's a discussion if the application for a project happens through SIMPO, or if you as your own member agency would like to pursue that application. And again, by the time we're done, we could have more than 3, keeping in mind that SIMPO will lead and pay for 3, but maybe there's an opportunity with the discussions that a member agency may want to take a lead for their own application. And so I just want to kind of let that be that we can definitely identify several projects. We need to identify at least 3 for SIMPO, and then decide who's going to take that on. Again, and Mike will talk about this a little bit more, but SIMPO's through Mike is updating the crash data, preparing the HSIP applications. But again, in the end, we'll turn it over to whichever member agency that project falls into, and would be the project that basically you would sign the completed application and submit it on behalf of your member agency. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and he'll walk us through HSIP 101 and then specific crash data, and then start talking about some very specific projects. So welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Vinny. Is it okay if I share my screen to pull up the information?
If Allison and Daniel give you permission, it's totally good with me. So,
or Allison could pull it up. I'm just wanting to show that what's
Yeah.
in the packet there, the 3 or 4 pages.
Yeah, they should be able to let you, I believe.
I'll pull it up for you, Mike.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Allison. So a quick overview of the HSIP process itself, and some of you are pretty familiar with it, but some of you may not be. So typically ADOT has about $35 million a year that they hand out through the competitive process of putting these applications together. This upcoming call for projects will be for fiscal years 25 and 26. At least that's the plan. So $35 million for each of those 2 years. So about $70 million over that 2-year period. You can only use fatal and serious injury crashes in your applications. You use the most recent 5 years of crash data. So we've pulled all that information. There are minimum and maximum project sizes for the application. So it has to be at least a $250,000 project, which in most cases is fairly easy to meet because usually once you add in the ADOT admin and design costs, you're up over 100,000 right there, 100 to 150,000. So the minimum and then the max is a $5 million project. Your project has to come in at a minimum of 2.5 benefit cost ratio, and that's dependent on the cost of the project and how many fatal and serious injury crashes you're going to be able to eliminate. The last cycle, which was for fiscal years 23 and 24, the lowest BC ratio that actually got funded was a 6.9. So kind of keep that in mind as we talk about potential projects. You need a pretty decent BC ratio to compete. And usually, and again, this depends on the project size, but usually you need at least a fatal, if not multiple fatal crashes for the project you're trying to get funding for. Or if there aren't any fatals, at least 10 serious injury crashes at that intersection or that segment of road. So, and again, that would be based on an average size, say $1 million project. As you go up in project cost, you're going to need probably multiple fatals. The next bullet point, the several bullet points there is no local match required for several types of projects. And I really wanted to point this out because some agencies just don't have the money to come up with a local match, or for whatever reason don't want to mess around if there's going to be a match. So if it's a roundabout, signals, signing, marking, a hawk, pedestrian hybrid beacon, rumble strips, or guardrail, that project, there's no local match, 100% federal. Any other type of safety project would require that 5.7% match. So if it's $1 million project, you're looking at coming up with $57,000 in match. And then the next long list shows projects that have been funded in the last couple of rounds from ADOT. And that's just to give you a flavor of the types of projects. So again, signing, signals, marking, hawks, paving shoulder, putting in turn lanes, bike lanes, roundabouts, improving sight distance at intersections with left turn lanes, lighting, realigning sharp and hazardous curves have been funded, installing raised median. You can scroll down there, Allison. Some sidewalk, pedestrian type of improvements, and then climbing lanes. So in the last round, about 3/4 of the funding actually went to local agencies, which is pretty big when you're talking $35 million. And this lists the MPOs and COGs that received that money. And mainly wanted to point out that it's not just Phoenix and Tucson that are getting the HSIP funding. MAG, the Phoenix region, led the last time, 19 million out of that 70 million, but the Yuma MPO had the second highest CAG down in the Gila County area, WACOG over in Kingman area. and then NACOG and Lake Havasu rounding out the bottom there. You can go to the next page. Not going to spend much time on this, but Federal Highway and ADOT really pushed these 20 proven safety countermeasures, and I've listed the 20 there. The first 17 are actual infrastructure type of projects. The last 3 there are more studies, and but all 20 of these would be eligible for HSIP funding. There's a link there if you want to go to the tech sheets. Federal Highways puts out some really nice 1- and 2-page tech briefs on each of these 20 safety countermeasures if you want to learn more about them. And then the second link we're showing there towards the bottom takes you to the Federal Highway Crash Modification Factors Clearinghouse, which gives thousands of CMFs based on the type of project to let you know. For example, a roundabout is going to get you about an 80% reduction in serious injury and fatal crashes. And those are used in the application. Questions on the actual HSIP process before we jump into specifics for the SIMPO region in terms of crashes? You can go to the next page there, Allison. So we're listing the 62 fatal crashes that have occurred in the SIMPO region since 2015. And again, the fatals are really what drive your benefit cost ratio on these applications. So that's why we're highlighting these fatals. And we're going to come back to these in a minute when we dive into specific locations. But scroll on down past the 3 pages of fatals, Allison. What we did was we took those 62 fatals, and we're showing a list here of corridors that had at least 10 serious injury crashes too. But we took the fatal crashes and we tried to link them to existing future projects that are listed in your regional transportation plan to see if there are any upcoming projects that would go hand in hand with where you're having a lot of fatals. And those would really be the ones I think that you'd want to pursue first. So we've listed key corridors here that had at least 2 fatal crashes that are also listed as a potential RTP project. A couple things to point out here in that list of potential projects. Most of them are widening projects, going from 2 to 4 lanes or going from 4 to 6 lanes. Very expensive projects. Most of them are going to be greater than the max $5 million project. So it's going to be difficult with most of these widening projects to justify an HSIP application. However, having said that, I think there's potential to pick smaller segments of these longer corridor widening projects, especially if we can get, say, a 1-mile segment that has 2 or 3 fatal crashes in it. For example, the first one there, Lakeshore Drive widening to 4 lanes between Navajo Drive and Fane Road. There were 2 fatal crashes there. It's about a 2.3, say a 2.5 mile corridor, which would be cost prohibitive for an HSIP application. However, those 2 fatal crashes actually occur over about a 1/3 mile stretch between Tonopah and Whipsaw. So one thought is you could go after a smaller segment of that longer corridor widening project and go specifically for HSIP funding for that, say, 1/3 of a mile to 1/2 mile stretch that includes the 2 fatals. Now, some disadvantages of that are, well, that's kind of in the middle of this 2.5 mile segment, and it's kind of not really feasible or to go after widening in the middle of this too. But what you could do is go after that middle section as part of the larger project and give you an opportunity to go after additional funding. So a quickie run of the numbers, go after about $2 million. You can get about a 7.5 benefit cost ratio for that 1/3 to 1/2 mile segment there that has the 2 fatals. And we could do the same thing for some of these other widening ones. A couple others to point out in that list of about 8 or 9 there. The State Route 89 in the Del Rio location, 4 fatal crashes. It's listed as a centerline rumble strip project in the RTP. that would give you a tremendous BC ratio. You're looking at about a 20 to 25 benefit cost ratio if that's a project that you'd want to pursue. The last one there in the potentials, Glassford Hill Road, the adaptive signal system. You had 2 fatal crashes at 2 signalized intersections there. That if there is interest in going after just a adaptive signal system, that would easily get you a very nice benefit cost ratio of around 7. You might even want to go after something like adding flashing yellow arrows as part of that, or instead of adaptive signal, and you'd again get a very nice benefit cost ratio. Granted, these aren't sexy and big projects, but they are, from a safety standpoint, pretty nice projects. The other potential HSIP projects, so these would be projects that weren't listed in your RTP, but again, I think have some potential for safety funds. The first one there, Iron Springs Road, there's a fatal, and I think it was 4 serious injury crashes. So going after some rumble strip projects there, if the county was interested in it, would be a nice one in terms of benefit cost ratio. You can get about 4 miles of rumble strips for about $400,000, about a 14 BC ratio. The Glassford Hill Road, there, I'm listing the 2 signalized intersections that had the fatals there. So another option would be to look at improving the sight distance there. You've got raised medians, and the way that they've been installed, it creates a sight distance issue if you've got an oncoming left turn vehicle in the opposing left turn lane and you're sitting there trying to lean to your left to look around that vehicle to see if there's any oncoming vehicles. This type of project has been funded the last couple of rounds by ADOT, and basically it would involve pulling the median back 20 to 30 feet, restriping the left turn lane to kind of shift over a couple feet. Gail Gardner Way and Fair Street, there was a fatal crash there. It looks like it's a 4-way stop now. I didn't have any traffic volumes to run a quickie signal warrants analysis, but if there was interest in putting a signal in there and it meets warrants, that would be one where you could go after funding to get a signal project. About a $600,000, $700,000 project, you get a BC ratio of close to 5. Again, it may not even meet signal warrants, but wanted to throw that one out there. The last one on that page, there was a fatal pedestrian crash there at the hospital on Willow Creek Road. And it's just north of the signalized intersection. It's about 400 feet north of the signalized intersection where this pedestrian crash occurred. There's a Circle K on the west side of the road, the hospital on the right side of the road. We see this a lot around the state. In fact, ADOT has put in a couple of hawks in similar situations. Over in Bullhead City, there was a Circle K on one side of the road, a bar on the other side of State Route 95, and they put a hawk in there because of the fatal pedestrian crashes that were occurring. So I wanted to throw that one out there as a potential. Then on Williamson Valley Road, there was a fatal left turn crash at Stasinski Road. Don't know if there's interest there, but going after a left turn lane, again, that would be an option that would get you a decent BC ratio of around 7.6 for a $650,000 project. One that I didn't squeeze in here that I meant to was Big Chino Road. Just west of State Route 89, you've had a fatal run off the road crash up there. So that one would be one to consider from the county standpoint if you were interested in shoulder widening, rumble strips. Again, you can get about a 5 or a 6 BC ratio there for a $500,000 project. And then some systemic type of projects. If there is interest, and I know some agencies aren't interested in the flashing yellow arrows, but again, ADOT has funded these types of systemic upgrading your signal heads to the flashing yellow arrows. There's some benefit to pedestrian safety in addition to the left turn crash benefits. I think one, if you're interested, that would probably give you the greatest BC ratio that you can get in the region would be a systemic rumble strip project. Whether or not that would include ADOT facilities or just, the rural county roads, that would be up to you. But there's a lot of runoff road fatal crashes, and putting, whether it's only shoulder rumble strips or a combination of center line and shoulder rumble strips, I think would be a great safety project. Again, it's not sexy. You're not getting the widening and the multiple lanes. So it may not be of interest to you, but that would be a very competitive project. And then wanted to mention a systemic curve warning sign project. Mojave County put in and received funding for this the last round, where they had a lot of fatal crashes and serious injury crashes at curves on their 2-lane rural roads. So they put in for some chevrons, upgraded warning signs, putting some raised pavement markers through the curves to improve delineation through the curves. So I know that's throwing a lot out there at you. Open it up for feedback, discussion, questions, concerns you might have on any of these.
Hey,
Mr.
Frank,
Blanket.
go ahead.
Sorry. I'm Mr. Blankenship, members of the committee. I just had a quick thought. With all the discussions regarding the earmark projects and possible infrastructure funding coming in, and then you also mentioned in earlier part of your presentation, some of the larger projects that go beyond the 5 million cap of HSIP. So I'm looking at that, all of those fatal crashes. It seems to me that the larger projects have a much higher BC ratio than the smaller projects. What the thought I had in mind was, and this may be also for the committee, is possibility of combining those applications for an HSIP project and also applying for the earmark projects on the same, not necessarily the same application, but putting the projects together and combining their funding and possibly coming up with a much larger project. It seems to me that those larger projects are more competitive in getting HSIP. And once you apply for the earmark projects, you're also showing skin in the game, as they say. So identifying a project that you already have funding possibility that might actually provide an upper hand on the application.
So I guess one comment on that is that there are no bonus points given, and I totally appreciate the comment and agree with it. But in terms of the application itself and scoring it, it is based strictly on the benefit cost ratio. So even though you show that there's, it's part of a larger project, or maybe the region is coming up with a big chunk of the project, it doesn't add to the score itself. It is solely ranked on the benefit cost ratio.
Right, but the benefit cost ratio, well, okay. I'm saying that the larger projects have a higher benefit cost ratio. So for the possibility of getting HSIP funding is much higher. But then when you apply for the earmark project, you're already saying, okay, we have an earmark project here that we have HSIP funding already approved. So I guess I'm kind of going the other direction.
Yep.
So showing for the larger project saying, hey, we have skin in the game on this project because we already have HSIP funding for it.
Yes, that does make sense. Yes. So going after the earmarked projects and showing that you've already got some safety money to put towards it. Yep, I agree. Now, when you say a larger project has a higher BC ratio, it's actually kind of the opposite. If by larger project you mean a higher dollar project, that's driving the costs up, which drives the BC ratio down.
I guess we need to play with those numbers a little bit, try to maximize that BC ratio.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I was getting at with maybe let's say it's State Route 69, which has by far the most fatals in the region. Maybe it's taking a 1 mile segment that had, say, 3 of those 12 or 13 fatals, and going after just that segment for a widening or a median installation or whatever the project might be for that 1 mile stretch, even though it's only going to be part of a larger project. For the HSIP application, it is the smaller project where I think we could get a decent BC ratio out of it. Yeah, so we're showing here we've color coded all of the routes that had multiple fatal crashes. So there were 13 fatal crashes on State Route 69, 10 fatal crashes on 89. By far, those two routes, and obviously they're very long routes, but they have the most opportunity from a fatal crash standpoint.
So I'm curious to know, what any of our member agencies may have any of these potential projects in the pipeline already, with staging funding. Ian, maybe you can enlighten us a little, but I know that you guys had some plans to do some work on State Route 89 between Fippen and Willow Lake Road. I don't know how that aligns with either the widening of shoulders or widening of lanes. But maybe there's an opportunity that timing works out right. I mean, obviously, some of these things, if timing, because this, am I correct, Mike? This funding is still what, in 24, 25 timeframe when it comes
25, 26.
25, 26, sorry. There may be a desire to move some of these, plans forward. I mean, that's a ways out for some of us. So are we, this is a question for the members, are we better off, trying to pick someone that's a little smaller that is kind of out there on the horizon, or are we aiming for trying to get something else in your short term? So just a thought for discussion.
Yeah, hey Dan, it's Ian with City of Prescott. The question that I was going to ask earlier was kind of related to the 89 projects identified and that concept of partial funding that you mentioned on Lakeshore. So if you get an HSIP for a portion of a project that's maybe bigger, because like the City of Prescott does have plans to widen 89, the time frame is still up in the air. It's a little ways out, but we're collecting impact fees and have identified that project to be done. So it kind of covers, at least two of the bullet points for potential projects that you showed. But what happens when you take the HSIP money and then add it into a local project? Does that affect the other funding of the project? Are we tied to federal guidelines? That's my main question. And that's kind of for Mike. Would there be do we have to meet the same requirements? Do we have to go through the same steps that the HSIP money is set for? Or can it almost be held as, like, there's a segment that the HSIP money is going to handle, and that's all handled under this process, and then the rest that ties right into it can be handled, like, locally?
Yeah, that's a good question, Ian, and I'll have to double check with ADOT Traffic Safety. I guess my first thought would be, since you're applying the safety funds just to that one segment, obviously you have to follow the federal guidelines and regs there, but the portions outside of it, I would think could qualify as separate projects. But again, I'd have to follow up with ADOT to see if they agree with that.
That would be my guess too, Mike. But I'm pretty sure, at least from our experience with HSIP funding, that ADOT will administer that contract, run the contract, everything. It's not, you're giving up local control really for this money if you get it. So Ian, if you wanted to somehow combine them, you're running separate projects. ADOT's running one for you, and you'd run your own, and somehow you have to make them fit together, and it may not be ideal in that respect too. So
yeah, gotcha. And I mean, the one is an 89 shoulder widening in that area. We have, we obviously identified that before, and I think we've, the city of Prescott has kind of stated our position that we don't want to go forward with that when we're going to widen. The plan is to widen to 4 lanes. So that still leaves that other project for consideration. But, yeah, those are the questions that we'd want to answer and then see if it did make sense for us. If it was going to go forward as some kind of, regionally agreed upon HSIP application, who knows? But those would certainly be the questions we'd want answered. As far as 4 Points goes and some of the other things that you've identified for the city of Prescott, like, we haven't looked at the Gail Gardner and Fair one. That seems like it wouldn't be really a regional project. That would be more like, it's good information for us if we wanted to proceed with our own application for, a signal or something back there. The Hawk might be more regional. And, it makes sense what you're saying that other communities have done that. We've also identified for some signal improvements or some kind of improvement at 4 Points. The signal that you noted is like 400 feet south. And so we might have projects that honestly change that whole area. Possibility of maybe looking at a roundabout and some channelization, which might preclude, like if we put a Hawk in and spent money on that sort of thing or did an application for it, it might not be the best thing if we have other plans. And so, I'm just throwing out stuff because I certainly wouldn't want to, waste anyone's time or effort on this thing to go through steps that the city might not need in the future because we might have other plans. But the information is great for us because some of these might be little local projects that we could go after.
Similarly, Norm, I'm curious your thoughts on some of those projects in the town.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Happy to comment. I did have a couple comments for Mike Blankenship, if I could. First one is, I'm just curious that in our 2045 transportation plan we just got done with, the 89A Robert Road intersection was the #1 safety hotspot. And we've had quite a few fatalities there. And I know there's been some recommendations for like reflective shields and the like, and they did, ADOT in the last couple of years put up some flashing signs before the intersection. But I'd like to make sure that ADOT's aware of that particular project because it has been a safety concern. I do understand the interchange is expensive. That's planned to solve a lot of that. But I would like to see some effort put towards it because it is a #1 safety hotspot. And then even in the 2015, there was a roadside safety assessment done by ADOT, and hasn't been a lot of implementation, in my opinion, for what came out of that study in 2015. Have you been able to look at that study?
Yeah, and Norm, that was actually the very first project we looked at in the HSIP analysis here. I think what's holding you back from going after a decent project there is for the 5-year period, it's only showing the one fatal crash, the motorcycle crash that kind of happened in the curve there. So it's not providing a competitive benefit cost ratio. Now, having said that, if all crashes don't always make it into the ADOT database, and that's what we're using here. So if there has been another fatal in the 5-year period, or maybe here recently that just hasn't made it into the ADOT database, we can definitely pull that second fatal crash in there. But as far as I know, there's just been the one fatal in the most recent 5 years, which is what we're limited to using.
Yeah, it's just interesting. Then maybe our data is bad in the 2045 plan that called out that was a #1 safety hotspot. So we'll just go with that.
More than 5 years, Norm. That's quite possible that, there were quite a few fatalities. I don't know off the top of my head, but if they were prior to 15, that may have been what was driving that statement too.
And that's been my comment for a number of years is there's been a lot of fatals there, and we just hope more time goes by. I said there's been a lot of fatals there, and I would just hope we'd address it. So the next time we have a fatal, we've taken a look at it. But we have a technical report that says it's the #1 safety hotspot, and we don't have really addressing it. It's just, and I would understand Mike's looked into it, so we must have gotten bad data then.
Well, the other thing, Norm, that may have happened is From a total crash standpoint, it's probably showing up very high, but in terms of what we're limited to using in HSIP, it can only be the fatal and serious injury crashes.
Well, I'm actually looking at the report. So it's page 34. It's online at the simple website in our 2045 plan. It says there's 3 fatal crashes there. And it's the #1 safety hotspot. I just, we've got a technical public document here. I'd like to make sure we're following it.
Yep.
But they've got 3 fatal crashes listed there.
Yep. I'll definitely take another look at that, Norm, because yeah, if there's 3 fatal crashes there since 2015, that would definitely be one to go after.
Mike, I had a few other questions too, just my own knowledge. I noticed on the listings you have here, the fatal crashes since 2015. What's a motor vehicle in transport?
So that basically just means it was more than one vehicle, that a vehicle struck a vehicle, as opposed to if it's listed as pedestrian. So that's under the incident first harmful description. What was the first harmful event that happened? Was it a vehicle hitting another vehicle? Was it a vehicle hitting a bicyclist? A vehicle hitting a pedestrian? A vehicle hitting a curb or a tree? So most of them are going to be listed as a motor vehicle in transport, hitting another vehicle.
Okay, thank you. And now, so I'm more of a layman, so the incident collision manner description is what I'm going to look at. Head on, 2 vehicle crash, left turn, someone made a mistake and pulled in front of someone.
Yep.
Other question I got, you've noted lakeshore segments. Obviously I'm aware of Prescott Valley roadways and the like. We've had some impairment challenge out there on lakeshore. So I'm just curious of these fatal crashes. I myself, personally, if you've got impairment, it kind of throws off, I guess, my understanding of data. There's not much you can do geometrically if people are impaired. Is there any thought to of the fatals there? How many were impairment? Where I don't think you're going to fix the geometry or something different if someone's impaired.
Yeah, and I can pull that up here in a second and check those 2 fatals, but it's a good point you bring up, Norm, because in the past, actually, if there was impairment involved, typically those fatals weren't allowed to be used. But here in the last couple of cycles, ADOT has allowed impaired driving or impaired crashes to be included in the fatal and serious injuries that we can look at for these applications. But you're right, a lot of times there's not a whole lot other than stepped up enforcement or education that can be done on the impairment side.
Well, let me tell you where I'm going with this. Out of this same transportation plan, Lakeshore was called up that it was dangerous. Well, it's actually got a lot of tangent spots in the areas it's just driver, error. And my point is, I hate to have a public report show that it's dangerous when it's really just impairment, because that's going to reflect on, hey, how come we're not doing something? I would say, hate to put thin public dollars after, impairment cause, crashes that really don't make any sense whatsoever. So I personally would like to see, if there was impairment on those fatals, I want to make sure our roadway segments are safe. And if it's impairment, then we're wasting money, in my opinion. And I think that's what you're going to find on Lakeshore.
Yep, I'll take a look at those 2 fatals. Actually, I can do it here after my presentation and probably answer before we're done here with the TAC meeting.
But I look for your experience to tell me that. But as I keep mentioning, I don't want to say we have a dangerous roadway section that's just impairment. So it'd be a waste of money. It wouldn't be my recommendation. But I want to make sure that I'm, accurate in that statement that, no, you got to go chase impairment if you can for several $1 million.
No, I would agree with you. If both of those were impaired driving fatal crashes, I would not have it on the list here as potential HSIP.
If I could just ask one more question. The Glasswood Hill Road, I haven't looked at it in detail. While I got you here, Mike, we're aware of, some of those offsets, but I don't believe we have protected arrows at those, at Center Court. And is that so would that be a sound recommendation, just put protected arrows in there for much cheaper than taking back the median?
Yes, you are correct, Norm. So that is definitely much cheaper, and it's actually much safer if you go protected only. The counter argument that that we would hear is, well, it has an impact on operations and congestion if you have to sit there and wait, even though, you know, there's no oncoming traffic. You could make the left turn on a permissive signal, but you're correct. Protected only left turn arrows would be the safest and cheapest way to make an improvement for left turn crashes.
Yeah, thank you. I just don't know, you know, we always competing interests, but we particularly like our trees for traffic calming out there. We could spend a lot of money on road diets doing the same thing that we have out there. So hate to be critical of it, but why not just put a protected arrow in and, you know, keep our road diet we've already done out there in place rather than knocking back the median. And, you know, if that's better sight distance, I'm okay with that too. But it would be worthy of study.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. And it would definitely be safer to go protected only. So if you wanted to still go after HSIP money to make it protected only, you're probably going to have to add a few more signalized intersections to it to get up to that minimum 250,000. Or maybe it's just a local project and it's not an HSIP funded project.
Yeah, and I appreciate the comments earlier. I would prefer on a small project like that not to take on the federal overburden. Absolutely. I'd like to work outside this contract and, yeah, I guess get that recommendation. And with your good work, I guess we could try an application.
Real quick on that, Mike, would the flashing yellow have a benefit in that case rather than going all the way to protected only?
It does. And I want to say it's in the 20% crash reduction range to put a flashing yellow arrow in instead of going fully protected. It wouldn't give you going fully protected is basically 99% reduction in left turn crashes. I mean, the only time you're going to have a left turn crash at that point is if somebody ran the signal. But you're right. A flashing yellow arrow has better safety benefits than just the typical permissive protected, which most intersections have right now. So yeah, that would be an option too, Norm, going with upgrading to the flashing yellow arrow.
But tell me, isn't protected just the best? I know ADOT here locally through Highway 69 through Prescott Valley, they've always advocated for going to strictly protected. That's really the safest condition.
Yep, I totally agree. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I don't want to muscle on you, but yeah, I'm not a fan of flashing yellow when really the recommendation is typically just make it protected. And that's what people got to get used to.
Yeah, I was just putting it out there, Norm, as an option because of sometimes capacity. People want to keep that capacity, but you're definitely right. Protected is like a roundabout. It's the safest option, you know. So, all right, I have a question, Mike, on the 89 portion. Looks like between the two projects you're looking at with Del Rio and then Old 89, that's been the subject of several fatalities lately. And I think you've got a 4-lane here, Frontier Road. For those that aren't familiar, it's a dirt road, a couple roads north of Old 89. So would that be something, the Senate rumble strips, is that something ADOT's already working on, or is that, or Dan, do you have any idea of that?
I don't know. I mean, I am aware that ADOT has successfully pursued HSIP funding in that section between Chino and Paulden in the past. I would imagine they are going to continue to do so. You know, but I really would probably defer to ADOT as to, you know, what the preferences are, whether we want to include something like that in this contract or not. You know, we get 3 here with Mike and his team, so you know we need to at some point come down to some agreement as to where we really want to, you know, put the efforts, because we clearly have more than 3 ideas here. So.
Yep. Yeah, so maybe John or somebody with ADOT could at least take note of this, and yeah, because that's kind of where ADOT, the county, and the town all meet right there at Old 89. So, I know everybody's concerned in that area, and like you said, I know there's, I think, a left turn lane up at Little Ranch and some other projects that already has HSIP funding for, so.
Mr. Chairman, if I could interject, this is all good discussion, but we've got a long agenda today, and I might suggest maybe we table this. We've got some good thought, but I think we're still far away from making recommendation, evaluating the data. I don't know if a TAC meeting, you know, when we're making decisions appropriate, I might suggest we do a working group meeting so that all of us feel like we can weigh in and, you know, have good discussion.
And Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman, if I
89 was that long of the discussion, but okay.
And Mr. Chair, if I can offer to, if you remember the schedule for Member Davis and everyone too, is the idea today was to begin the discussion, for Mike to provide the information to you. He provided in your packet. This, by no means were we looking for any decisions today, but we needed to start the discussion. Mike, based on the discussion today, is going to return to the June meeting. Again, if you would rather have a working session, we can set that up too. But based on this discussion today, Mike's going to start, excuse me, he's going to start drilling down a little bit and try and streamline what he's heard today to come back to your June meeting and start narrowing it down. There's going to be a call for projects in July, but they're not going to be due until, I believe, is it November, Mike? Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so again, we have plenty of time. The idea is that we were going to start taking bites out of this based on the discussion. So it's up to the TAC. You're more than welcome to have a working session, but this is multiple meetings where Mike's going to come back and just continue to work with you, hear what you're saying, and again, come back and really narrow down the list. So we definitely know it's a big conversation. There's a lot here, but just want to clarify we're not looking for any action today, other than to start the discussion. And I think, Mike, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think you have quite a bit already based on today's discussion to come back for June and again, narrow down where we're at. Does that sound about right, Mike?
Yes. Yep.
If I may, before we move on, I was trying to defer to others, but certainly the county is very interested in the Stasinski intersection, Mike. We have been doing numerous safety improvements along that corridor the last several years. We have a study that was done in 2017 that identified spot improvements. I am almost positive Stasinski was one of those locations. We've just been working that way. I think if it's possible, we're totally on board with that being a possibility here as part of discussion. But I also think that if it doesn't make the cut, the county will probably pursue a application on its own at that location. And then of course, Iron Springs, you mentioned Iron Springs, that is, even outside the SIMPO boundaries, we have fatalities that I think we're, very much interested in trying to do something. There's been discussions with our board member for the Iron Springs Road area, Supervisor Harry Oberg, and we're actually going to do kind of a corridor study of Iron Springs Road in the next fiscal year. So that will hopefully help to identify some problem areas as well as spot improvements. So sorry about the extra few minutes there, everyone, but I just wanted Mike to hear from me as well on some of the county related issues that are outside the incorporated boundaries. So thanks.
Okay, and I understand the schedule's tight, but I know we dedicated a lot of time over to Willow Creek and talked extensively about Robert Road again, so I want to make sure everybody has time to give Mike some initial input on what's going on here. So, and I'll just reiterate, I know 89 and Old Highway 89 are an ADOT road, but it's still in the town of Chino Valley, so I want to put that forward. With that number of fatalities, that's just as many as Robert Road. So I just want to put that out there as well for future discussion. So I'd like to make sure anybody else, before we move on, if they have a quick comment they want to put in on this to give Mike some heads up, we'll ask for that and then move on.
If I can offer for a moment, this is John. Let's go ahead and discuss these items, and if there's something we need to circle back with ADOT, I know that as part of the applications, we're working district-wide, so we can take a look at what's identified here and maybe compare that to what other parties we might have in the district. But I think it's really good to get those identified here, and we can discuss that with Alvin and so on. I also want to follow up briefly on, I think Norm made a very good point about the driver behavior elements on some of the projects, because we've had a couple of projects come in that were intended to be safety, where we've ended up having to kind of scale back on the project because some of what was recommended kind of deviated from standard. And when we looked at the project, we had to look at the driver behavior and had to realize that didn't justify deviating from our standards. So I think as we identify the HSIP and possible needs, we also need to keep in mind the design standards and so on.
Okay, thanks, John. Anybody else have any comments on this topic before we move on?
Mr. Chairman, Mark Hennig from ADOT LPA has his hand raised. I believe he has a comment for you.
Okay. Mark, if you're on board, do you want to chime in?
Mark, you're muted. We can't hear you, Mark.
Is that something Allison can take care of maybe, or?
It's a good question. Yeah, it looks like you're not connected, Mark, for some reason, but we can't hear you at this point. You can get connected, we'll let you chime in. You put something in the comment box.
Okay, let's see, there we go. Okay, so I think since we can't get your audio, you said we need to probably consider cost estimates for FY 25 and 26.
I assume that means it's a long way out and costs are likely to increase. And we need to make sure we're accounting for that and not using current cost estimates.
Yeah, and if I can, Mr. Chair and members, so this is definitely something I think Mike has worked pretty hard on. We ran into this in Havasu. It's a very painful process, when Mike develops an application and the scope and life happens and time happens and fill in the blank happens. But, that project, we need to circle back, and then locals and the MPO is involved in discussions for costs. So I guess, Mike, I know we want to wrap this up, but if you can kind of comment on that relatively quick. But I think we've really improved it significantly. You're working very active with ADOT, but as much data as you have. So if you want to just comment, Mike, on hopefully how we've improved the scoping process.
Yeah, and it's actually a very key point that Mark brought up, and I should have mentioned it right up front, that basically if you get an HSIP funded project and you get into design and construction a few years and there's overages, you as the local agency are on the hook for the amount that goes over the project. So if it's a $2 million project and once it's designed and constructed, it turns into a $2.5 million project, you, city or county, are on the hook for that extra $500,000. So it's a very important point. We have been working with ADOT. ADOT has posted some HSIP project actual design and construction costs, and not just the estimates, but the bid costs that came in onto their HSIP website. So we've got some additional information to use. ADOT's allowed inflation costs to be included as part of the application. So we realize it's very important, and a crucial part of the application is getting as accurate a cost estimate as you can get, considering that it's still 3 or 4 or 5 years out.
Okay, and a quick one on that too, just with the crash data. If they're out that far, does it change, or once your the project's approved, does it lock that in? If that Makes sense.
Yeah, it's pretty much locked in, Frank. It's based on the crashes you used at the time of the application.
Okay, so if some of those crashes fall off the 5 years, it doesn't matter if it's already locked in.
Nope, nope.
And Mr. Chair, as we wrap up this discussion too, I just want to maybe mention one point for consideration moving forward, and I'll defer to the greater consensus of this group in the sense that I know we've talked a lot about the state route system and ADOT's responsibility. So in this particular project that SIMPO's doing, it'll need to be the consensus of the group to decide if there are any HSIP projects on the state route system. Again, I think I've heard several comments that, you know, kind of leave it up to ADOT, and if that's the will of the group, we'll go ahead and go along with it. But I do want to just give you a point of reference that, again, we'll use Havasu and other regions. There were HSIP projects that the MPO did that were on the state route system. So clearly there's pros and cons, and I get there's a lot of different philosophies that you all have. So I would say in the end, what are the best regional projects? You can take on the direction to say, you know, let ADOT take on that responsibility, and so be it. But I do want to put that out there for consideration. You know, as you look at these projects, even if it is on a state route system, you know, this group may say one of the 3 projects you want to go ahead and support that. And again, you can also take the other approach and say, you know, ADOT needs to kind of focus on that and work on that. And then the last point, to Dan's point, you know, whether the group chooses one of the projects, the county may work on it. And again, I would say through this particular contract, we could also continue conversations if the county wanted to work with Mike, that we might have an economy of scale through this contract and have an additional application that the county could pay for if they didn't want to do it on their own or they wanted to use as Mike's expertise. So keep some of those things in mind as we go forward. I think we can be really creative and leverage all these resources. But Mr. Chair, if you're ready to wrap up, we can move on to the next item.
Okay, if we can just have a caveat, if Mark gets on board with audio, I'd like to be able to hear his comments if we circle back to that later.
And it looks like he's connecting right now. I don't know if it'll.
I think
if he pushes *6, he can be unmuted.
And it says you're connected, Mark, if you want to try and speak.
Can you hear me, Vinny?
We can.
Good morning, all. My apologies. Thank you. You pretty much covered my topics. I won't delay the meeting any longer. Thank you.
All right, perfect. So with that, if there's no objection, we'll try and get back on schedule. So item 8, review, discussion, and possible action to recommend approval for the additional funding for the State Route 69 Safety and Capacity Improvement Project and subsequent amendments to the FY 2021 Unified Planning Work Program and the FY 2024 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Vinny, and kind of let you run the discussion if that's okay.
You bet. Thanks, Mr. Chair, members of the TAC. So actually, I'm going to ask, and I'll explain this, but I'm going to ask that this agenda item be tabled or withdrawn at this point. And the reason for that is we are continuing discussions with ADOT as we speak. I've already had some discussions with Yavapai County with Dan Cherry, Supervisor Brown, and then also the city of Prescott through Ian and Craig Dotsworth. Appreciate their conversations. There are some cost overruns to the design of SR 69. We had some agreements from, again, Prescott, Yavapai County, and SIMPO tentative, I would say. However, on the ADOT side of things, there's still some movement and even some more additional movement. So with that said, I talked with District Engineer Alvin Stump yesterday, and him and I both agreed that ADOT internal needs to go ahead and have a few more meetings with themselves to resolve a couple significant issues related to the project. So we were prepared today to go ahead and have an amendment to go ahead and transfer some SIMPO funds to the SR 69 project. And I had extended an invitation for Alvin and his staff to go ahead and give you an update on what's happening with it. But his request was let them work out a few more issues, circle back in June, and let's talk about it at that point. So unless there's any questions, I would ask that this item go ahead and be withdrawn or tabled at this point. And we'll go ahead and continue communications with Yavapai County, City of Prescott outside of this meeting, but we need ADOT. We need to give them a little more time to resolve some internal issues.
Okay, with that, I'll open it up to anybody that would like to discuss this or make a motion.
I'll make a motion to table this till June.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call for a vote. We'll just try it. All those in favor, if you can unmute, have that reminder. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so I guess once you work out all the details, Vinny will just bring it back, put it on a future agenda. So,
yes, sir.
All right, and so that takes us to item 9, review, discussion, and possible action to recommend SIMPO adopt ADOT's transit asset management plan performance measures. You want to take that away, Vinny?
You bet, Mr. Chair, members of the TAC. So what you have in your packet is the performance measures that are set by the Federal Transit Administration in conjunction with Arizona Department of Transportation, and Allison's and Daniel are bringing up the performance measures in your packet. So just if you remember, it's been a while, but you all have, excuse me, you all have recommended the Federal Highway Administration performance measures for such things as, you know, road conditions, time and or efficiency of routes, freight, bridges, things like that. So this is on the FTA or the Federal Transit side of what SIMPO does. So you'll note, again, lots of acronyms, but lots of numbers. On this particular one at the very top, there's a list of numbers that start with 5, such as 5305, 5307, and so forth. The reason I highlight that is those are the particular programs that are transit related. So 5305 is the transit planning funds that SIMPO receives on an annual basis. 5307 is the urbanized public transit that the region receives, which the town of Prescott Valley is now taking the lead as we speak. 5310 is the enhanced mobility management activities. And then 5311 is what Yavapai Regional Transit utilizes for rural transit. So I explain each of those a little bit more for the reason that these particular performance measures, again, set by FTA with ADOT, in partnership with ADOT, have identified these things that we're all working towards. What does SIMPO do to help with these performance measures? Again, as an MPO, we are going to be working with the town of Prescott Valley, partnering with them. We also, through mobility management, through transit planning funds, will continue to be aware of these goals. Clearly, you know, Prescott Valley is in a unique situation as they're just starting. So, you know, when you look at the vehicle situation and equipment, well, there is really none at this point. So the better example would be through like the 5310 program. And again, we have a mobility management agreement with NACOG that they're having meetings where they're meeting with the various 5310 programs. They're looking at the federal investment that those agencies like a New Horizons, might apply for vehicles, and what is the state of their fleet? Is it in a state of good repair, and how is the MPO facilitating, helping them to go ahead and be good stewards of those federal resources? So that's where we tie into it. And for us, it's best that we defer to FTA and ADOT and stand with their performance measures. Again, we've adopted other performance measures. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background. This is what came up in our review of our work program, was ADOT, Transit, and Federal Transit Administration encouraging us to go ahead and be sure that we also have the FTA performance measures. So I would say it's standard. This is what other MPOs and COGs have in their regions. Nothing different. The SIMPO's not modifying it, changing it. We're just standing, if you will, behind it and with it. But with that said, happy to take any questions or comments on it.
Okay, I don't have any questions. Does anybody else?
I'll make a motion to recommend SIMPO adopt ADOT's Transit Asset Management Plan.
Thank you. Have a motion. Anyone like to second?
I'll second.
I'll second it. This is Norm in Prescott Valley.
I defer to Norm.
Thanks, Dan or Norm. Allison, you pick. All right, have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. Again, unmuted. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. I think that takes us to item 10, review, discussion, and possible action to recommend approval of the FY 22-23 Unified Planning Work Program. Again, Vinny.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, members of the TAC. So again, just a key reminder, you all have already reviewed the work program. You've recommended it onto the executive board. The executive board approved it for public comment. This document has been out for public comment for the last 30 days. We have received no public comment on it. So now we're ready to go ahead and ask of your approval to go on to the executive board for final adoption. I will note that staff has needed to modify a few things, at which I will take you through today to be very transparent and clear. Allison's going to bring on the screen anything that's highlighted in yellow so that I can explain that, and that would be part of your motion today to go ahead and recommend this be approved by the executive board with these modifications. So Allison, if you would take us to page 9, please. So what has happened since your last viewing of this document is Councilman Phil Good of the City of Prescott has been chosen officially as the SIMPO Secretary Treasurer. So we did note that in the work program. That is a modification. Next modification, Allison. Page 12, there was a clarification by, we had the review that some of you were able to attend with the Federal Highway Administration and also ADOT. There was some clarification as to moving forward how consolidated planning grant funds, how they were identified as far as the previous year. There or before July 1st are still needing to be separated, and then moving forward will be consolidated. So we had already consolidated them, and Allison worked to go ahead and clarify some of the numbers. So these numbers are current and reflective officially, and then at the bottom of the page are again the carry forward numbers that we went ahead and updated as of most recently that will be carrying into the next year. Continue on, Allison, with the next page. Just more of the same numbers, just in the different elements. You can continue. So on this page, I went ahead and added, or asked Allison to add, we're going to continue to, in years past, we had worked with various interns. I had a student contact me from ASU, and we're looking to continue or develop an internship program with that student, working with our human resources, our Yavapai County, Wendy Ross, our director, to see if we can't make that happen, but we needed to identify it in the work program that wasn't there previously. Next modification. We went ahead and added the North Prescott area planning efforts that we're involved in, and also, again, the transit performance measures that you all recommended today. Again, just some cleanup of some numbers with the consolidated planning grant funds. It was the overall was kind of covered earlier, but then you get into these individual breakdowns. Next modification. More of the numbers that were from before. Allison broke them down into the individual tables. It was also discussed at our federal highway review to note some of the work that's being done with the Highway Performance Monitoring System, or HPMS data, and how the member agencies are continuing to work with ADOT and submit that information. Next modification. Developed this, what was happening, or what I noticed was happening, and we're still going to do more cleanup moving forward, is when some additional funds were identified as we were reconciling finances, we're putting them into some projects and causing a little bit of confusion as to how we came up with a dollar amount for those projects. So for time being, I have kind of a placeholder until we have further discussion. So this special planning projects category for now will be a catch-all. Eventually, I will circle back with you all and have discussions to program these funds. But what the practice was prior to me was plugging these dollars into, say, like a Great Western or a Sundog Connector future projects, which is where they may end up being. But what I've noticed in discussing with you as a TAC is there's a little bit of confusion as to how we came about for a particular dollar amount. So I don't want to add to the confusion. So I needed a placeholder for some funds, and we'll have future discussions on it. So that's been added. Next modification. Same thing here, special projects. So rather than to add the dollars that Allison and I identified into existing projects, we went ahead and put in that placeholder, updated carry forward funds. Next modification. And that's it. So with that said, again, you all have reviewed everything outside of that. Those are things that we've had to change due to the Federal Highway ADOT review or other things that I mentioned. We're looking to, I'll answer any questions you might have, but we are looking for a recommendation onto the executive board for their final adoption and approval of the Unified Work Program. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I just got a quick question.
Sure. I was about to ask. So go ahead, please.
Vinny, on page 29, the Great Western Corridor Study Update, I see it's listed in this current fiscal year starting July 1st.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead, Norm. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, I was just clarifying.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Chair, Member Davis. So what we're looking to do is yes, that was the tentative schedule, but I think, again, keeping in mind with me being new executive board members, what I'm looking to do is go ahead and host a joint retreat working session with the TAC and the executive board. And I want to be really clear because we've had some real movement for lots of reasons. You know, we'll use Great Western as an example. Now Prescott is doing that North Prescott study. Land use study, which is going to directly impact that development in that area. I believe there's some real impacts to what potentially could be Great Western, in addition to some new roadway configurations that would influence it. So with that said, I want to bring all of that information to you all at a retreat in July fully prepared that if the will of the group is that Great Western remain at the top of the list, then we'll absolutely move from that retreat to put out a scope for that. But I think we need to have some real conversations what the next 5 years looks like. I assume all those projects will remain, so it's just a matter of what is the right order, if you will, as we look at Great Western, Sundog Connector, SR 69, and anything else. So I need to be able to have that time to work with you all. So it was tentatively scheduled, Norm, for July 1st, but it's been tabled for us to have the retreat.
Have we got notice on the retreat date yet, Vinny?
We are looking, Allison, I believe, second and third week. We're waiting we're bringing somebody in to help us facilitate. And once we have that settled, we're going to send out I think a doodle poll to the TAC and the executive board. But Norm, as far as I know, we're looking at either the second or third week, trying to stay away from the 4th of July holidays.
Thank you. Those are my questions. I just, curious where the group is at on Great Western. I know it didn't meet. We wanted to table it. And my understanding too, Vinny, that funding is subject to Highway 69 when that gets worked out, to take some funding from Great Western to help fund that construction project on 69?
No, we don't. We're moving monies around, but in the end, no, we don't. I don't. Unless I'm missing something, Norm. We're not at this point. I'm not looking to take any monies from Great Western for the 69 project, but we're definitely moving monies around. So sorry if that added any confusion, but unless I'm missing something, sorry.
No, I just want to align with the group on what we're doing. So that's basically where my comment is at. Thank you, Vinny.
Thank you, Norm.
Anybody else?
If there isn't, I'll make a recommendation to approve of the fiscal 2022-2023 Unified Plan Work Program with changes as of May 6th.
A second, Ian from Prescott.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor, unmute and signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I think that carries. So that moves us to, make sure I'm on the right spot, item 11, is that right, Vinny?
Yes, that is correct.
Review and discussion and possible action to approve issuing a request for qualifications for the SR 89, 89A on-ramps alternative selection report. So is that you, Vinny, or you want to turn it over to Daniel?
We're gonna give Vinny a break. He's been talking for a while, so it's Daniel for the next couple items.
All right, yes. Your show, Daniel.
So we've obviously discussed this quite a bit. I'm just going to go over a couple changes that we've made. So we did add some language to that this will be going out to everyone on the on-call list, and that's on page 2 here. And then the other thing that we added since our last discussion is in regards to scoring, just to make the review process easier when we do go to TAC review. So one question I did have for the TAC was, based that this is going to be a 5-page submittal, did we feel that this scoring process is enough, or do we think maybe we need to add a few more pages, maybe bump it up to 10-page submittals?
I'd like to say that we're sending this out to 20 companies, right?
Yes, so keeping it small is...
I don't want to review 10 pages, please. Don't make me.
Well, we feel the scoring is fine with 5-page submittals, then I'm good with that.
I am okay with it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would chime in too. I don't think this is a terribly complicated project that needs a lot of discussion either, so.
That's a good point, Frank.
Mr. Chairman, I got a quick comment though. I know the last HSIP application we took, we had 5 submissions. 3 were way out of range of what we even had funding for. Have we identified how much funding we have? I know that's still in play. Do we know a neighborhood ballpark, Vinny?
Yes, Norm, we have $75,000 set aside for this.
And that's this year's fiscal money till June 30th?
Yes, it is, and sorry about that. So, Norm, that's one of those moving numbers that honestly, we've moved that number back and forth. But as of now, it is out of fiscal year 21. Check with me tomorrow. It may be out of 22, but we do have the funds. It's identified, and there's just a number of factors why it's moved back and forth. But Norm, as of today, it's fiscal year 21 funds that we have, and it's $75,000.
Is that available are we able to tell that to the consultants?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that by no means. You can share that. It's identified in our tip. I don't believe that we put it in this request for quotes, but if the group would like to share that, I'm fine with that also.
It's my opinion. I don't know what the rest of TAC feels. You get what you pay for, and I think the consultants would appreciate knowing the funding. And forgive me, Vince, I know ADOT finance is challenging, but we went from having no money to now we've got 75,000. So that's good stuff.
Yeah, it is
and
good
well
stuff.
done.
Thanks, Norm, and you should have sat in on a few of our meetings because Allison and we went from some deficits to some pluses. But either way, I'm glad where we're at. So thanks, Norm.
Well, it's just the continued frustration, and not your fault, Vinny. It's what ADOT finance does. We're found money now. We may have to rob from studies next year. It's just difficult for me to know how to scope things as a TAC member to make recommendations when we don't know how much. 75,000 is quite a bit for a study, and appropriate. That's the end of my comments. Thank you.
This is John. If I may ask, if we're going to put the budget in there, do we want to have cost proposal be a scoring criteria?
I think it's number 6 is on there.
Yes.
15%.
I'm sorry, Dan, I had trouble hearing you. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, scoring, the cost proposal is 15% of the scoring, I think, is what Daniel had.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I think John's question was, if we've got the budget amount in there, does it make sense to still have the cost proposal portion in the scoring? In my opinion, it'd be yes, it's still in there because there might be some variation in their cost proposals.
Okay, wanted to check.
I had one last lingering question, if I could.
Sure, go ahead.
This is an ADOT facilities. Has ADOT approved the scope of work? I asked that last time. Just wanted to confirm with Daniel.
Yes, it says gone to ADOT, and I believe that they are okay with the scope of work.
Thank you, Daniel.
Okay. Any other comments?
Have we determined who the review committee is going to be?
It will be the TAC committee, Norm.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve issuing the RFQ for the SR-89 to SR-89A on-ramps, alternative slopes and report. Just here.
I'll second that.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries.
Just real quick,
Takes
for clarification, we were going to add the budget into the RFQ.
Yeah, Dan, that was your motion?
I said, as discussed here, to kind of get our discussions included, I perhaps should have said as with noted changes. If you would prefer, I can amend my motion. In fact, I will amend my motion if you don't object to calling another vote.
Yeah, I think that would clarify things if you're good with that. So you're amending your motion to include the budget amount in the request for qualification.
Reconfirm the second. Yes.
Okay.
Hi, this is
Call-
Myrna Bond. I'm sorry, this is Myrna Bondoc from MPD. I just, I would need to verify that according to our contracts department. I believe adding the budget to the quote may be an issue.
That doesn't surprise me, Myrna.
Yes, I in fact, I've had these conversations with Sally Palmer about, and I realize that the budget is on the tip, and that certainly, you can't stop a consultant from looking. However, to add it in the request for quote may be an issue to our contracts department.
And I guess if I can offer maybe I don't mean to offer a loophole, but the way that if we can, we'll reference that the budget is in the tip, or staff can find the language to, if you will, thread the needle so that we're not in violation of anything. So what we'll do is staff will put a link to the tip and note that budgets are established in our transportation improvement program.
So noted, Mr. Administrator. I will include that in my amended motion that the tip is referenced in the document in the RFQ, but not specifically state the amount that we have in there for it.
Okay. So that's I guess, another amended motion. Are we good with the second on that?
Yes, so seconded, yes.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion? Okay. So all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. That takes us to item 12, review, discussion, and possible action to recommend approval to post the public involvement plan for public comment.
Yes, this is the public involvement plan. Yes, thank you. And this is a public proactive involvement process for the development of our Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, MTIP, our Regional Transportation Plan, Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan, and our Unified Planning Work Program. So this document is part of Title VI, and it's a document for use of the public to see how that they can interact with our plans and how they can comment. And it kind of outlines everything that they have to do, which plans that they can comment on, how long the period is, as well as open meetings. So if we approve this today for public comment, it will be posted for 45 days, if that's correct. If not, Allison can chime in here. And with that, is there any questions on this document?
This is Norm. I have a question when I'm looking at some of the tables. They do list that we do meet publicly. We've been meeting online. How come we haven't changed the schedules?
So our meetings, for the open public meetings, it says or virtually with those tables.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Thank you.
Any other questions for this? If there's not, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll do motion, Chair. Recommend approve to post the public involvement plan for public comment.
Okay, then I'm assuming that's recommended to the executive board to post it for public comment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, have a motion. Anybody would like to second? Okay, I'll second that one. So a motion and a second. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Item 13, mobility management transit update. Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So I'll be brief on this one. I want to congratulate and welcome the new transit manager that the town of Prescott Valley and Norm have chosen to hire, Pedro Rodriguez. Pedro, if that name sounds a little familiar, was formerly with the Northern Arizona Council of Governments and was leading the mobility management for all of Yavapai County, including SIMPO. So we welcome Pedro, and he's working for Norm and for the town of Prescott Valley, and really looking forward to Prescott Valley taking the lead with transit. I do have a meeting scheduled for next week to sit down with Norm and Pedro and see how SIMPO and the town will work together moving forward and really support the efforts. This has definitely been a long time coming, lots of transit discussion. So I'm feeling pretty excited about the movement we have, and if we can continue to work as a region and with the city of Prescott and what other transit services are doing, like Yavapai Regional Transit, and continue to support the region. But wanted to give Norm an opportunity if there was anything you wanted to say. I know it's still very early on, Norm, but if there was anything you wanted to offer as an update to the transit activities that the town's taking a lead on.
Yeah, thank you, Vinny. What our current effort's going to be is getting the designated recipient study status for the federal government, and of course send out a request for proposals for microtransit services. So just been, Pedro's just been on board a couple of days, but that's what we're moving forward with, and we'll get timelines identified and hopefully get that out for, public opportunity to comment.
Great, thank you, Norm. And we'll keep this as a standing item. That's really all I have, but we want to continue to recognize that the MPO plays a critical role in transit planning in the region. We receive transit planning dollars, and we'll continue to have discussions as to how we support really the entire area. So any questions or comments, happy to take on that, but that's all I have on that item, Mr. Chair.
Mr. I'd have just one additional comment. I would like to see this be recognized by the executive board on their agenda, that transit is a part of what SIMPO does as part of administration and funding.
And Mr. Chair, Member Davis, thank you, Norm, for saying that. Absolutely. I'm definitely looking to make the same standing item so that we continue to keep this conversation on the table. I know there's a lot of history, so I'm trying to look today moving forward on this particular topic, and from a strategy standpoint, I want to keep this as an ongoing conversation. So Mr. Chair, I appreciate Norm's comment, and that's my intent at this point.
Okay, great. If there's nothing further, I'll move on to the next item.
Mr. Chairman, I have to sign off. I got an important meeting at 10 o'clock.
Okay, sorry for the long meeting, Norm, but thanks for all your input. And
thank you.
I'm sure Vinny will update you if there's anything he needs to inform you on for the rest of the meeting. So, all right, so Mark, if you're still with us, ADOT local agency update.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the SIMPO TAC. Just a couple of quick announcements here. I'll try to be brief. I know this meeting's gone long, but I want to bring you up to date on a couple of training opportunities. ADOT LPA training dealing with the federal aid process. There's a series of training that will occur once per month. I believe the next one is project initiation, which is scheduled for Thursday, May 20th. The first one kicked off last month, which was planning and programming. So they will go through JPAs, better authorization, procurement, clearances, working with the project manager, and public outreach, et cetera, for about 9 months. So the next one is project initiation on May 20th. There should be an announcement coming from Jennifer Catapano on the LPA process branch a few days before or the week before. And I believe, Vinny, you're aware of and on that distribution list.
Yes, I am.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Let's see, stay on task here. The MUTCD 11th edition review comments were due to the FHWA back in March. Did you receive the email, Vinny, I sent during this meeting to you that ADOT Traffic Safety has compiled a list of comments? Just want folks to be aware of those comments that ADOT's looking to submit to the NCUTCD committee to do final approval of the 11th edition of the MUTCD. You'll notice, Vinny, if you want to send that out to your TAC member agencies, I think I sent you a copy as well, Frank. They have these things, these comments. It's quite a task to review the MUTCD changes. Lots of chapters, as many of you know, and to go through that, a group had been meeting. I just want you guys to have it on your radar that these changes are coming to the MUTCD. They highlighted the changes they agree with in green, comments that they agree with the concept but have some concerns in yellow, and then of course disagree or propose language in the changes is highlighted in red. That might make it a little easier as you go through the different tabs on those comments. If you have the opportunity to be aware, I just want to give you a heads up that there is a shall condition for increasing the width of the stripe on roads for autonomous vehicles, and that some of these changes may have some impacts on local agencies and their maintenance budgets. So just FYI. Enough said there. The off-system bridge call for project back in February, we received a total of 4 applications. 3 projects were selected, none of them in the Simpo region, but I just wanted to make you aware 3 projects were selected there, so we'll be moving along with those. The Bridge Committee just approved those this past month in April. You all are aware the HERF Exchange program was approved by the board, and so that program continues on. And also wanted to give you a reminder with regard to some manuals that were updated. Again, this might be a repeat, but the roadway design guidelines, ADOT's roadway design guidelines, standard drawings was updated in January 2021, so just be aware of that. And many of you are familiar with the ADOT standard specifications book, the blue book dated 2008. Yes, it has been updated and it's twice as thick. I don't think I have my camera on, do I? Sorry, I thought I was showing you a photo of the blue book. It's now the red book, and it's 2021. All projects advertising after July 1st will be following the red book, the new updated standard specifications manual or book. Last but not least, I don't want to leave out my everyday count stakeholder meeting.
Interrupt real quick? Is the red
Go
book
right ahead,
available? Is the red book available for purchase yet? Do you know?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is available.
Buy that through ADOT's website or what?
Yes, sir, through our contracts and specifications section.
Very good. I appreciate it. We're going to order some.
They only gave me one. Otherwise, I had to pull teeth for that. But anyway, it is online. They are wanting folks to go online and use that. And again, it is twice as thick as the 2008 book, which is surprising. Right. But anyway, FYI, you're aware of that.
Okay.
And again, back to the Everyday Count stakeholder meeting. We had our last meeting in March 11th, and I appreciate Mike Blankenship speaking today. I enjoyed his presentation, and Mike spoke at our stakeholder meeting back in March about the the funding applications and developing cost estimates for HSIP. I sent you, Vinny, the link for that, and Frank as well. These are individual links for just the one speaker, so they're not that long, but it's basic information, what Mike covered that day. Mona Aguilin-Swick, she's the HSIP manager. She did a little introduction to the HSIP call for projects, what they're looking for. That kind of goes along with what was presented earlier today, but I recommend you consider looking at those links. Hers was only about, I actually think it was Larry Talley who spoke, or Mona, about 15 minutes or so, and took some QA. And then the third one that day was reducing rural roadway departures. Kerry Wilcoxon gave an update on the EDC5 initiative, all the research that was done the past couple of years on reducing rural roadway departures. The next Everyday Count stakeholder meeting is scheduled to occur in June. However, many of you are aware that I've kind of been beating a drum of planning level estimates, thinking that that was an area of need to help local projects be successful. And I've kind of had 3 sessions on that, trying to have local agencies participate or present the pros and cons, what's worked, what has not worked so well. And we tried to peel the onion there on how to do a planning level estimate with our pre-design group and how to use the E2C2 historical bid cost data. So those links are available also upon request. We've sent those out. But moving forward, I'd like you all to consider if there's some issue or item that you would like addressed or maybe speak to. What's worked well with project delivery, what hasn't worked well. We think the last couple years, since we've tried to reformat this meeting, the communication between our ADOT project management group and the local sponsors has improved. If you don't feel that way, please let me know, or that was one of the top issues a few years back. We think we've got a little bit better line of communication. We still know there's challenges with funding, but kind of wanting to look for some new items and give you all opportunities to share what's worked, what hasn't worked. So feel free to, Vinny, if you'd collect any information or send it to me directly. One of the items just to throw out there that I do have a presenter ready to speak from ADOT, and that's on indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity, referred to as IDIQ, up to projects up to about $2 million. We had an experimental one down in the Yuma region where a number of local agencies used their STBG funding for an IDIQ contract of repairing ADA ramps in the region. And they covered a number of entities, jurisdictions. And so you're doing the same type of work and maybe getting a better cost. And Tom O'Reilly was the PM, and he's willing to share that information or experience with us. I don't know if you all are interested in that, but I just wanted to throw the question out to get some ideas so we can address, make sure we're hearing from the local agencies. So with that, I'll yield back my time. Thank you all, and have a good day. Or any questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, Mark, I was just checking my email. I don't have any emails from you, so I'm assuming that you probably still have my Havasu email address. So if you
I'll
double check. Yeah, and then go ahead and copy Allison and Daniel in it, and that'll make sure, Mark, that the SIMPO office receives it, and we'll absolutely forward all the information. But I did check. The last email I have was from actually when I was in Havasu from you, so probably just an email. No biggie. Just wanted to let you know.
And Vinny, I did get those, so if you need them, I can forward you those as well.
Yeah, if you could, that would be good. Then we'll make sure we get it out, Frank. Thank you.
Okay, and maybe just a quick housekeeping thing before Mark leaves, Vinny. So I'm just wondering what some of maybe these outside agency updates like Kevin or Mark, Would it be better for you, Mark, if we tried to get you earlier on the agenda, just in case you had to break out in our meetings? Or?
I'd appreciate that. I appreciate any time you give me. Again, sometimes we have a little more information than, and maybe it's not a mandate to attend, but I do have staff, a new staff member. We're probably going to get a third staff member. So I'd appreciate that. Sure.
Okay, so yeah, Vinny, maybe that might help. Just maybe group Mark with Kevin and those folks in the front. And I think local agencies, just my opinion, but local agencies in the back is fine, but it might help.
Mr. Chair, happy to do that. And I would say we actually we had it penciled that way. Today's meeting was really unique because of the length of the agenda. So I do apologize to Mark and others at the end. The kind of the order of events for at least today was I needed as much energy as possible for that HSIP discussion, which you all did, and I appreciate that. And I knew we were going to kind of have to put a few people at the end, but I will say you're right. Typically, I would give these updates at the beginning, and we'll do that moving forward. So thank you.
Okay, perfect. I know you do a great job, so I appreciate it. All right, with that, that checks off item 14. So item 15, ADOT District Office Report. John, the floor is yours.
Okay, very quickly, the State Route 69 widening project is currently in design. It's at the stage 3 design, moving towards stage 4. A little bit outside our area, maybe the State Route 69 Spring Lane intersection is currently under construction. There's been a little bit of a delay with getting some of the signal equipment in there, but that should be done here hopefully this month. And on State Route 89, the Road 1 North project has begun construction. Currently out there, you'll see some utility work being completed, and the roadway contractor for the installation of the signal should be out there soon. I don't have a start date yet. That's been kind of pending while we've been working with CenturyLink to get some utilities moved. That's almost complete, so the roadway work should begin soon. Also on State Route 89, ADOT has a project from Paulden up to the Hell Canyon Bridge to do a surface treatment. That project is currently advertised with bids expected to open May 21st, and construction should start shortly after that. So that's what I'll have for today.
Frank, you're muted.
Did you guys hear that, or was I muted?
I did, John.
No, John, we heard you. It was Frank that was muted.
It was me, and I apologize for my camera too. It's got a mind of its own. So we'll move on to ADOT Multimodal Planning Division update. Myrna?
Hi, so I don't have a large amount of updates to provide. However, I do want to mention the UPWP agreements are coming your way, Vinny, via DocuSign. And I just wanted to remind the committee that the final UPWP is due to ADOT on May 24th. And one last item, if there's anything specific that the committee would like me to report on, please feel free to contact me directly, and I will be more than happy to gather the information for you. Just give me a few days before the TAC to provide or gather the information, and I'll report it during the TAC meeting. Thank you.
Okay. And I forgot to ask, but if you have any questions for Mark or Myrna, please chime in. Or John, for that matter. All right, so let's move on. I think local agency updates are next. It's probably easier for me just to use the roll call listing, so I'll start. Just some quick road updates for Chino Valley. We're finishing up a $1.1 million slurry project this Friday. So that got a lot of our local neighborhoods done. We've got Road 2 North project has been awarded. That will go on concurrently with the 1 North signal that John mentioned. So this summer, travel inside of the center part of Chino Valley could get adventurous for some of the local residents. But I know those road improvements are needed, so hopefully they'll be patient with us. And just a budget note for Chino Valley, we are seeing increased funds, which is a good thing, and council is applying a great portion of those funds to road maintenance and repair, and along with some other projects. But we are seeing increased funding in Chino Valley, so that's good news. We might be catching up on some of these roads that are in poor shape, so looking forward to it. I think Norm had to leave us. I'm sure he'll give us updates at the next meeting. So I'm sure they've got a lot going on in Prescott Valley, so I'll be happy to hear that next time. John Hughes, Town of Dewey, you have any updates you would like to share with us?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We're doing our annual chip seal projects through our town, and it's on a 5-year rotation for each road. So we're in the process of that right now, and there's normal maintenance throughout the year. That'll be it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Ian, anything for City of Prescott you'd like to discuss?
Yeah, we're finishing up our contracted crack sealing around town, and then we're going to move into our fiscal year 21 pavement reconstruction, and then we have a pavement rehabilitation project, so some pulverization, and then milling and traditional paving, chip seals and products like that. We're doing that coming up, currently starting. And then also we, starting next week, over the next about month and a half, we'll be doing our spring striping citywide. So those are the things that I have for the group.
Okay, thanks. And Craig had talked to me about some of those pulverization projects, and I asked him, I'll ask you too, if you got a schedule of those and have someone that could email that to me, I'd like to come check that out.
Yeah, I'll be sure to pass that along, make sure they get that to you.
Okay. Quick note, I'll move along when my battery's dying on my computer, so hopefully I don't die out. But Dan, you're next.
All right, we've been going through our budget process here at the county and had budget hearings with our board last week, and some fairly in-depth discussion yesterday, and I'm happy to say Public Works has come through fairly unscathed with regards to our budget proposal, which is nice to have that support from our board transportation-wise. Our new exciting project is yesterday the board awarded a design contract with Kittleson to do a roundabout at Pioneer Parkway and Commerce Drive. That is, for those of you that have been through there, there's a new leg going off to the north, which is in the city of Prescott, accessing a subdivision that's going in there. We've had some accident history there. I don't think anything's reached fatality status, but it could very easily get there with the current configuration, which is pretty much just stop condition on Commerce and no stop on Pioneer Parkway. And we have a desire to make that much safer with regards to the improvements on that intersection. So we've decided on a roundabout rather than kind of step to a signal and then someday in the future go to roundabout. We'd like to do it all in one fell swoop. And so we're going to do county's paying for design on that. And if everything goes well, and we certainly have had very good conversations with the city of Prescott so far, I foresee a likelihood of some kind of partnership on building that thing, maybe even starting as early as this winter in early calendar year 2022. That project, I've kind of set it up so that if somehow we get a influx of some federal money, that thing will qualify for federal process pretty easily. It's one of a few locations we have that I think I can get federal right-of-way clearance through, and utility clearances, because we've done that before with some of the ARA funding, if I recall, way back in 2008. So let's see, we've got an annual guardrail project that's got some locations on Iron Springs Road where we're replacing old out of spec guardrail with some new standard guardrail. I've got our Williamson Valley Road Phase 3 safety improvement project at Kelly and O'Neill. That is adding turn lanes as well as lowering the road there for some improved site visibility at some intersections. That project, we bid that out, I think, last week or the week before. It actually came in under our engineer's estimate, which is nice to see. And so we are awarding that, I believe, at our next board meeting on the 19th. And then lastly, kind of our big project, which is coming with the new fiscal year in July, is I've got a chip seal of our full length of Iron Springs Road. That's a $2 million plus project. So I'm hoping we get a nice bid price on that, considering the length of that road. I don't think I have anything else of importance to share at this time.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. And just a quick note on that chip seal. If you've got cooperative language in there, let me know. I may have a small chip on 2 North I might need to touch up this fall after my project.
Yeah, Frank, we put a piggyback clause on all of our contracts, so keep that in mind. In that project, we're talking about maybe doing a 1/2-inch chip on that for durability purposes rather than 3/8 inch size. That may not be ideal for local residential type roads because it is a little noisier at times, but we find it stands up way better to our snowplow equipment when we utilize it. So just be aware of that. But we also do typically a fall and a spring chip seal contract for a lot of other roads. There's a good chance that even with that Iron Springs project, we would probably bid that out with others, and they would have both 3/8 and 1/2-inch chip specs in there.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I noticed a lot of agencies, the chip seal took a beating last winter from all the snowplows. So.
Yeah. We had some brand new stuff down that did not fare well, unfortunately.
Yeah, Alvin was in the same boat with ADOT. So, all right. Am I missing anybody? So I think that takes care of that. Vinny, you have anything else?
Nope. I think we've talked about it. It's good. We're good. Thank you, sir.
Okay. I appreciate everybody's patience for the long meeting, but I think all the discussion was important and needed, and hopefully next time we can meet our timelines a little better. So then we'll adjourn.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Appreciate it.